pre-roll shout out for the exploding epic pop robot rocket punch team. We super appreciate you. Ivan, Grant, Con, Jack, RJ, Tweets, Matthias, Peter, Robert, Kelso, Kevin, Derek, Dom, Nick, Danny, John, Andy, Philippe, Jake, Pete, Ben, Commander Newbie, Hal, Kieran, Jody, and welcoming Chris Rigas, Guy Finney, and Nelson to the team. Thank you so very much, guys. Hey, guys. Hey, Pop Robots. Welcome. So, flying into it, I've been all full of motivation this week and zooming along. I wanted to share, which is probably one of the most daunting aspects of the Falke, the horrendous seamlines that go down the sides here. And yes, they are as rough and as infamous as you've probably heard about. And here they are cleaned up before testing. And this time has been the easiest version I've had at it so far. And here are the tools that I used. It was very, very simple. So I was kind of, I'm excited to show you this one for its, the elegance of the simplicity of the solution. So, boy, that came out nicely. Simply put, I went through the squeeze method that you would see in my Machine & Krieger Polar Bear, and I put in copious amounts of of the Gunze Mr. Hobby extra thin cement and squeezed it through, and lined these up quite nicely. Leaving that set for a little bit, there was quite a bit of plastic extruded. Now I'll put in a nice close-up photo here, so that you can see the texture that I'm talking about. Now there are a couple of ways. You could start taking a ceramic blade or X-Acto type blade, hobby knife, and cutting it back, but I just flew into it to see how different it would be. And these are the game changer for me. And no, I'm not getting paid to shill this stuff. I just really think they are so awesome. I wasn't sold at first because, the toy-like colors and stuff like that looked a little gimmicky, and I've used, a bunch of different kinds of sanding solutions before. When I say sanding solutions, more often than not, you'll see it even in my old videos. I have evidence to back up my claims that I was mostly working with the Tamiya sanding papers. Yeah, it's just sandpaper. I mean, you could just get the stuff from your local hobby store. It's just that they happen to sell these in the local hobby store where I was getting my other stuff. That's why I bought the Tamiya stuff. And it was pretty good with water. The grits were easy to follow, and it was just there. Simple. So these ones, I thought, when I first heard about God Hands and the nippers and the prices and everything, I think I've mentioned this in videos before that I was not on board. Their marketing looks quite slick. All this kind of weeb action on them. Although I like weeb stuff a lot more now. And I've met Nipako-chan and she's a lovely kid. But it was kind of turning me off a little bit because I saw myself a little differently back then. I thought I was a bit more of a serious modeler. Do I not see myself as a serious modeler now? Well, yes and no. I think I'm better at being an educator now than I'm actually as a modeler, or at least wanting to improve in that direction. So there's that. Now these, why I am McLoving them. The top three. I had this prepared, and instantly you turn on a camera and start to forget. Why I think these are really awesome. And these are the 3mm thick ones. It's the sponginess. The sponginess is the game changer, and the fact that they don't delaminate, they don't start pulling apart when wet, because I like to do my sanding wet as possible. I don't like to wear a mask. You get all sweaty under your mask, and sanding wet just seems to give a smoother finish. So all of that's the preamble. So I like that for that reason, the sponginess, the strength, and they last longer and better than the Tamiya's smoothing papers. I'm not sure the Tamiya product really qualifies as a proper sandpaper because they're very thin. They wear out a lot faster. These have been going for the whole model. Even the most abrasive here, the 120 grit, is still, ready, I'll do it right next to the mic. It's still very, very textured. it's lasted amazingly well. You might be able to see it's come off in a couple of spots. This one did the heavy lifting. Now let me quickly run through why that's so magical. Are you able to see along the curvature here of the Falke? If you hear that very small soft voice, that is Tom Ware speaking behind the camera. If you can see just along the curvature so you can see that it's round, I just like to show them that it's very clearly curved. Yeah? Cool. It's just that I wanted to make sure you guys can see that. If I was operating the camera, it's very difficult myself. And it's a really unusual shape too, because it's made with the Lightning aircraft booms as part of a kit bash and scratch build. The shapes are very, very complex. They're both flat and highly curved at the same time. And there's some inconsistencies too. So we need to keep that for the, to keep the, what's the right word, the personality, the flavor of the Falke. We can't just rough them off. And what I really like about these, and cutting them into 1 centimeter strips there, is the way they fit. Now I'm going to use the not, I'm not noobing out, I'm using the not rough size just to demo it for you. I'd put a little bit in water, and for the first stage when the plastic is extruded, I would very roughly go in a circular motion along the side here. Very, very, very simply. And due to the sponginess, it cut back the extruded plastic first and very nicely, but it did start scuffing up the area around here. You can still see there's ever so slightly a little amount of scarring on the plastic, but this is acceptable for 120 scale. If it was Gunpla, I would smooth it back further. You can see it there. There's still a little bit. Some of the plastic has not fully regained the sheen. And in fact, even here, some of the original scarring from this harsh 120 grit is still in place. But very simply, these ones do a lot of the magic. I used to use the straight edge type files, and you'd have to keep judging and guessing how to keep the curvature and looking at it. And it was very, very nerve-wracking and challenging. These ones, I kept it mostly on there, but with a firm downward pressure in the center of the piece, and this nice circular motion like this, boom, boom, boom. And the reason I didn't take footage of that is because it would be laborious to edit and push through that for you, to watch some guy holding this, doing this. That's really what you would see. And it just cuts down the plastic. Now I'll show you, this is what it looks like. I've got a nice close-up photo. I wanted to use these close-ups because you can see the detail. You know, thanks to macro lens photography here, you can see how that takes it all back. So the heavy lifting is done here with the 120 grit. Rough it back, boom, boom, boom. Get most of the plastic off. Then, as in this photo here, so lucky I've got these photos so I can go back to it. As in this photo here, then the second stage is to cover it over with Tamiya Basic Putty. Yes, I don't show a lot of, what's the way to say this? I hope it doesn't come across as boring, that I keep reaching for this product, but it works. It works every single time for me. I like how it works. It's very predictable. I don't feel that I really need to. I went through a stage where I tested loads and loads and loads of different putties and came back to this. So this is just based on my professional career. I come back to this one every time. It's just easy. It's there. Boom. Done. I quickly slathered that all along the sides here, leaving it for a depth of about 1 millimeter, just enough so that it's a little bit over. And you can still see a few spots left here in the panel lines. And you can see where the plastic has gone back. So where there is none left, that means the extrusion of the plastic through the joint was complete. But there's a couple of spots you can see, like just there maybe, it might be too small to spot, that there were some spots that the extrusion technique did miss, and that's what that would fix. And maybe some scarring there. Then very simply, I also rubbed that one back also. There's no need to go smooth yet with the same 120 grit. After moving that back, and you can see here's where my main trouble spot was. You can see there's a lot of the putty left here. Now, that's the heavy lifting. So heavy lifting is done. I'll move these little guys out of the way. Heavy lifting is done with the 120. Now, here's where the magic of these sanding foams was made apparent to me. At first I thought the colors were just pretty, but no, it's actually really useful, because once they all start looking like this and you're moving between them, I start to forget which color's which. Even on some of the Tamiya sanding papers that I would do once upon a time, if I would try to cut it so that the numbers were apparent on the back, but sometimes you'd miss it, you wouldn't know what grid it was, so some more organization was necessary. But look at these. Even me, I know 120, where's pink? In my hand. 120, 240, 400, 600, 800. What I like about this is it cuts down on mistakes, thinking time, and for something like polishing out a seam line, it's a very Zen-like activity. It's good to just belt through really quick. So then, as I can show you in these photos and going through here, once I'd polished it back and got the majority of I could see where, once you cut it back, you can see where it looks and feels flat. Once you're there, you need to change modes. This one is for your heavy duty lifting. The lower scales are for removing unnecessary plastic and unnecessary putty. Once you've gotten to that stage, you kind of have to change modes. Now, this will be already apparent to a bunch of you who have been modeling for some time. For my intermediate and advanced followers, you guys get that. But for our people who are new to us and maybe have not been involved in a handcraft before, you go from the heavy lifting at the bottom, and then the upper layers, I would say this one still does some of the lifting, and then from about 400, particularly 600, especially 800, it's polishing. It's actually using this end of the spectrum to get rid of the damage that this end does. That took me some time to really understand that. I would think that this one must be the best for everything, and I would start at 400, and it would take me a lot longer. The result would not be any different either. Doesn't turn out better starting at a higher one. It just takes more time. It was actually one of the Machining Krieger team who said, well, why are you kicking off at that level, Linc? If I did that, I wouldn't have any fingers left. It was Genzo-kun. He would just use the harshest sandpaper, and I was amazed, but he'd be done so quick. So instantly I got on board with that. So moving up through these, I then continued that very same motion. That's another reason why I didn't video this part of it, because it really is that. Finger in the middle, on either side, polishing it through, focusing mostly on the top, but the compression of these wonderful sanding foams has kept the shape perfect. Moving up through. 400, 600, and 800. 400 was still pretty good. If this was for Hobby Japan, I would have actually stopped at 400 to be done. Because those guys, the way they can take photos, Honma-san, the photographer there, he took photos in such a way, it was like an 80s way of photography, that you needed to be more visceral for the detail to show. But because this one's going to be done with pretty good camera gear, and for physical print, I've decided to go up with 600 and even 800. And then for the final step, one of the things I'm really liking to do now this is especially good for Gunpla, and I think this tool is something that started the whole sanding foam, perhaps, and sanding board. These foam-backed emery boards that we use for doing our nails. That some other people use for doing their nails. Maximum awkwardness implied. These are super good too, because it's a 3-part step. I just don't know how to guesstimate it. Maybe 1,000, 1,200 grit if it was in the same range. Higher again and then the polishing version. So this is just to buff back some of it to some kind of parity with the rest of the plastic. And they're wonderful to do. And again, it's that same motion, but this one I wouldn't just go straight on. Although it won't take off a lot of plastic, I make it with this polishing motion. And again, all of these upper level steps are simply polishing the plastic back to get it ready for paint. So pink, then white, and that will dull your plastic a little, but then as soon as you get to this gray, the gray step, gosh, that's nice. And it brings it back. There will still be some scarring. I want to see how that looks under paint now, because some of these could look kind of cool. And I can, if you're using lacquer-based primers, etc., surface products, we will be able to still further buff this back. So, and to just quickly mention them, here's what I have on hand in spray form. This was the one you've seen me use on a handful of models. I think you might have seen this one used before if you've been with me for a while. And I've got this new one. I got the guys at Gaia to send me a test of this one. I've never used this product. I'm kind of excited about it. I wonder how dark it is. It might be on parity with maybe Stynylres. There it is, Stynylres, grey. And what I'm quickly going to do is shoot a little bit of that just down the side to see how these look. Sorry, don't worry. I'm going to shoot some of this down the side to see how it looks under primer. And just before I start putting on the extra pieces, double check how it looks. I mean, it feels all right, but there's nothing like putting some primer in it to double check. One thing I didn't mention so far, you'll notice that I did sand off these details. Here's what they look like before. I just took a quick bench snapshot so that I can recreate them. And I'll be making them, I'll be scratch building them out of plastic card, and just adding the details, which will be drilling some holes into them. Cool. Well, let's test with a little bit of primer down the sides and I'll show you how it looks. Hey guys, welcome back for round 2. It's gone 90% well, and anything over 80 for me is a win. This really is. In some ways, it's been this build is a little frustrating for me because it's kind of I've labored out. I've really dragged out the construction phase, but there's so much good stuff to share because this is it's a building dream in some ways. It shows a lot of really good stuff that will be useful for us on a bunch of other projects that we can do together in the future. Now, the main thing, of course, though, we're going with that center line, seam line. And when I say 90%, there's no really glaring parts that stand out to me as fail. So the center line here is pretty much, that's good. I don't want to really update any of that. There's a few scratches there, a little bit of a shadow here, but that's about enough I think you can get away with. There was something here that needed to be readdressed, so I put a bit more Tamiya Basic Putty on there. This one, an interesting problem has arisen. Now this back end here is fine, I think. Now they always look different under paint too, so that's an interesting thing. Oh, and by the way, I tested this out for the very first time. Gaia Notes Surfacer Evo spray type. So you've seen me in other videos use Gaia Notes Surfacer through the airbrush. This is the first time to use it from a can. I was a little bit worried because their demo color here is quite dark, but it looks basically the color of Tamiya, and it's less powdery, if that makes sense. I'll dig through the photos I took of this if you can see it, but it seems to go on a little less dry, so I quite like that. Like a happy medium between, say, the Mr. Color sprays and Tamiya. So, first time using it, I'm really happy. What's that has highlighted here is, I've tried to set up the lights here so that you can see it. There's a shadow left. So, technically the seam is fixed, but the plastic bows here. So, what will happen is, for some shots or some angles, like from this angle, from my perspective here, it looks perfectly smooth. But then as we rotate it through some angles, and I want to do some dramatic lighting gallery shots with this, I can see that the plastic just not sure of the right term to use for this. Like it's bowed, it sticks out, it goes in once and then bulges out again, which is a really interesting sort of thing. So I'm going to show you a couple more things to do here. And whilst I was readdressing them, there's quite an unsightly gap here at the back where these the fuselage halves again go together. This side is the fixed side. I got that all in one go. That looks probably good enough for me. I'll scribe through there to keep the detail continuous, but it's probably good. And I'll show you quickly how I'm going to do that one. So as a recap for the primary way to do these, I'll show you the circular action in motion. Now, because you've just been watching this continuously, I was using this rough, the one, is it 120, 180? The roughest version of it previously. I'm not going to now because I don't want to damage the surface here. So the lighter one I'll go with is 240 pink, dipped in just a little bit of water. And I won't go through the whole process. It's a little bit time laborious. I'll just show you. Again, all of this is done in this nice smooth circular motion. And that will see you to 90% done. Just be careful not to file back this edge here where it overlaps with the beginning of the nose cone, the end of the fuselage assembly. I was probably a little bit too impatient putting that on, but you know, I don't mind practicing discipline like this. So yeah, I'll basically work that back and then work through the grids, but like that. That's how that's going to be fixed, and then that will be more than fine. This part, however, I wanted to show you because it's different, and it's going to be the same that I'm going to do here and here. I'm going to use these guys, these sanding metals, because they're kind of sanding sticks too, aren't they? But they're made out of stainless. And I'm strong on these too, but maybe not as strong as the sanding sponges, these guys. These ones, 100%. I don't think there's anything I could suggest to them to make them stronger or better. These ones, sorry if the reflections there, I don't know if you can see it all. I want to do that samurai movie sound effect, right? One through. And I've got a video up there on YouTube as well where I put different grits of sanding cloth to them. They last a long time, and this is not to do with guard hands. The only thing that I'm not 100% on is this, that they're coming off a little bit. They don't handle wet sanding as much as the sponges do. And again, that's not guard hand's fault. That's probably because of the double-sided tape that I'm using is either not strong enough for the job or just not one that can be used in water. So again, George Costanza moment. It's not you, it's me. Sorry, I saw that one the other day. I thought it was pretty funny. I'm going to use this though to show you what I mean. The reason I use the hardback one here is because this surface is actually quite flat, quite straight. I'll try not to make too much of a mess, but again, a little bit of water. And this one was a little rough, so I went a little bit too hard, too long. I get my angles correct, and it's still slightly curved. I mean, it's hard to find a straight angle on a Koyokuyama Sensei design. He loves all of the organic shapes in his work. I just hope the mic doesn't pick this up too strongly. But I'll work this back gently here. A rocking motion for me seems to work, and as soon as I see too much plastic come out, I know when to cut back. See here? So that's the topmost edge. It means I need to be careful on upper pressure, and I need to hit the bottom a little bit more. Here we go. And I'll just work this back to being smooth. There we go, that's pretty good. I'm not sure if the camera can quite pick it up. I'm being very careful to keep the hard edge, the topmost edge there, not quite hitting this detail here, so that instead of blunting it, if anything, I'm kind of accentuating it just a little. There we go. Easy to say, difficult to do. Okay, that's getting quite close. Once there's this much plastic showing, I know that there'll be enough depth to cover that seam line. Once you've made one of these, you'll see it. It'll come out. It's very difficult to get that back end together very tight, unless you're an absolute building whiz. Then for the top part, this is the cool thing I like about these, is that they've come in 2 widths. They've got, I think these were 10. I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but off the top of my head, they look about 10 millimeters. These guys, I think, looks like 6, but it's quite a bit tighter. And it just happens to be perfect Falke width there. And what I really like is that there's no abrasiveness on these edges. So even if that's hard up against this, the end of the engine here, there's no abrasion happening. So it's almost like they were perfectly made for this job. And that's it. Once I've got this smoothed up, I'll get some close-up photos for you. And that's basically how that one goes. Yep, so I will keep going with that one. I don't want to talk, I gotta watch it really closely. I don't want to talk and mess it up and take off too much. So I'll go back and do that. But basically, that's how it's going to look. And then I'll re-scribe that panel line down there. Now the second thing I wanted to show you with these, with that bowed plastic there, I think this will benefit from the harder edge tool. Because sometimes the sponges can be too conforming. I know it sounds odd, right? You want them to conform on curves, but this one, I feel that it's, yeah, see how it's hitting there first? So it's obviously proud of the surface. I finally used the correct technical term. I'm pretty sure that's right, isn't it? It's proud? Yeah. So I want to work that back gently so that it's not as prominent. And I think for this we need this harder edge tool. As you can see, it's just starting. See how it's hitting the top plastic and there's leaving that in between? So this was obviously the plastic that was proud. And I want that to be pretty tight because it's right up the front. We can get away with being a little bit looser towards the back end because that will tend to be away from the camera. Pardon me for being very, self-centered in explaining this one. It's just that because I'm thinking about it for photography, for publication, thinking the photos are mostly going to be looking this way. Of course, for your version, you may have different parameters. So you could make it tighter from the back, or if it's for in-person viewing only, I wouldn't go this hard. If you're going to show it in a big hall or something like that, it's okay to actually be a little bit more rough. Yokama-san's test models are always quite rough, but he makes them look so cool. It's quite an interesting thing. Yes, this is coming back better, and you can see I'm feathering it back and forth like this. I don't know a name for this. I imagine we all do it, but it's a kind of it's just something I learned in a vacuum, so I've never needed to explain it before, nor had the opportunity. So check it out. The double link whammy wrist curl, get rid of dodgy seam line technique thing. Okay, there we go. I'm pretty confident now that bow is out of the plastic, and I think we're good. And to clean it up, I'll just come back now with higher steps. So number 2. And maybe polish back with the sponges again to get it nice and smooth. But that's basically it, and I'll come back and test once more with this one. Okay, Tom was mentioning to me that we're hitting our time limit. I don't want the camera to overheat again. So I think that's going to be pretty good. In fact, I don't think I need to recheck this one. That is looking primo. Next steps. I've made this one. I've scratch built these ones to replace the details that we've put out there, and I'll shape them down. And I've also taken some really good close-up photos to show you how I've hollowed these guys out to give more apparent, realistic depth. So that one, obviously, that's that side. The teardrop comes in towards the center, just to give it a bit more apparent depth here, which I think will help to make it look pretty cool. Okay guys, happy weekends. I'll get this out ready for you for the weekend. And I'm so excited. I really want to get painting on this guy. I'm so excited for it. Okay, talk soon. See you guys, bye. Big thanks to Hobbyco and the visionary Ryan San Pedro for bringing the Japanese hobby to us locally. And of course, the Brobot Inner Circle, the awesome folks that make this happen. I couldn't do it without you. Always, thank you so very much. Please join us.